All right, I'm back. Go ahead and start admitting some of these people here.
Marty.
Give them a second to kind of get set up and in. And welcome everybody to the final episode, final interview for May is for Mystery Writers series. Tonight we're joined by Agatha Award-winning author G.M. Malliet. She is the author of the acclaimed Saint Just Mysteries, the Max Tudor Mysteries, and the standalone suspense novel WEYCOMBE, and numerous short stories collected in crime anthologies. GM began writing fiction on weekends and mornings before work. She was a corporate communications and marketing person, submitting short stories to anthologies and competitions, while also working on a crime novel. In 2008, her award-winning first novel, Death of a Cozy Writer, was published. GM, welcome to A Free Thinker's Corner. Thank you for being part of our series.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so
I
much.
just want to let everybody know who has joined us here on Zoom. If you just keep your mics muted and your videos off, we're also streaming live on Facebook Live. So unless you want your picture to be on Facebook Live from a cough or a dog in the background, we'd ask to keep distractions down. If you do have a question or comment, please use the chat box down the bottom and I will relay it to her. Everybody over on Facebook Live, same thing. Well, you can interrupt it, but use the comment box and I will share your comment or question. And so well, let's get right into this. First question. This is one thing that I've always wondered, and I think I kind of know the answer, but why use your initials as your pen name instead of your real name?
You know what? I've been writing so long that back in the day, I wanted to be sure that I wasn't being prejudged as male or female. Um, I maybe that sounds ridiculous, but I didn't want people to think I was a man, but I also didn't want to announce my name was Alice or something. I wanted to be neutral, let's say. And I was actually publishing little essays and things as GM Malliet. I don't know that I did fool anybody, but I felt it was more of an advantage to not announce that I was female. Isn't that kind of sad? But that's back in the day.
Do you find things a little bit more easier now? In that now that you're an established writer,
Yeah, I don't. The world has moved on, and I think things are better. I don't think they're by any means perfect. I'd still like
right?
to see more women, running the show here and there, but it's gotten better.
Now, on your website, and I apologize for mispronouncing your name, first of all, but you call your writings traditional. What do you mean by that?
They are traditional in the Agatha Christie tradition. I'm a big fan of hers, big fan, and they are updated though for the current day. They're a bit trendy, I hope. So I mix the two words.
Okay. You have a, bachelor's in journalism, an MA in psychology. You also received an MPhil in psychology from the University of Cambridge and Oxford
Mhm.
University in the UK. What is an MPhil? Is that the master's in philosophy?
MPhil's Master in Philosophy, yes. It was this psychology of education, memory and learning. Is the details are a bit boring, but that was my real interest has always been creativity and how we learn and how a child acquires language, which is miraculous when you think about it. So why in
Mhm.
the world do we have this ability? It seems to be inborn that at some point we'll start, we'll see a cat and say cat. But that's a miracle that we can do that. So that's what interested me. That and the people who, uh, as Deepak Chopra says, they don't think outside the box. They just get rid of the box. They are completely inventing all the time, and I just find that fascinating. I wanted to understand more about how the human brain works.
I did some amateur reading in psychology, and it's fascinating. What type of journalism did you do?
Well, the you know
Did you work in the journalism field?
No, I really didn't. It translated to, writing, marketing copy and, promotional copy and things like that for corporations. I never worked for a newspaper other than the school newspaper, the college newspaper.
So did though getting a bachelor's in journalism and then also your master's in psychology, did that help you along your road to becoming a novelist?
In a very roundabout way. I can't ever say I had a set path, but I went to do this MPhil in England, and it became obvious even to me that I was that I was really there just absorbing the architecture and the language. Their use of language is so beautiful to me, and th- just their way of life. Everything. I'm a big Anglophile, needless to say. So that turned, being in the country, I had to be there legally. So I was doing these studies, but I was really just gathering information that would turn up in my books, 10 years later, 20 years later.
Mhm. So who are some of your favorite philosophers?
Philosophers? Oh, I don't have a favorite philosopher. If I'm allowed to say that, I really don't study philosophy.
Oh, I keep thinking that the MPhil was the philosophy. What
Oh,
was it
no.
again?
It's a Master of Philosophy, and that's just what they call it. It
Oh,
covers a range of topics. It's just their name for what we call the Master of Arts, basically, Master of
oh,
Philosophy. I'm sorry,
okay.
that really threw me for a loop. I've never had to admit, but I don't think I've done more than stumble through opening paragraphs of a book of philosophy. I find it impenetrable.
Okay, so who's your favorite psychologist? Who did you study the most? Who
Great.
did you
A
what did you
partner.
find that you gravitated more? Like I've read a lot of Carl Jung, I've read some of Freud, but I don't. I know their connection, but I gravitate more towards the Jungian side of psychology. But who do you follow more, and who did you study more?
Well, the whole language thing was, oh, no, I'm blanking on the name, of course. There are psychologists who their specialty is language acquisition. Um, I can't say I had a favorite, but I read a lot of these academic type uh, articles. Freud is a favorite just because he wrote so beautifully, just like Conan Doyle was just a beautiful user of language, just gorgeous. I don't think I agree with Freud's theories anymore. I don't think a lot of people do. The Jungian thing, the kind of universal, we're all tapping into the same well. I think there's something to that, but no one's ever asked me that question before. Obviously, I hope they don't again, or that I'm better prepared.
Well, one thing that I found kind of interesting about Freud is we have a book called um, I guess now I'm blanking on the name. Well, anyways, it's about the history of dogs and how dogs evolved from wild and how humans evolved and how they evolved together and eventually came together. But one thing I
Yeah.
found was that Freud had uh, kept a dog had a dog, his dog in with when he was doing psychoanalysis and stuff, and then he noticed that the dog would its demeanor would change with what the person was saying, and I guess he wrote it down in his journals, but he never published that. I found that kind of interesting.
You mean the dog picked up on someone who was maybe dangerous, or
Just the clients or the patient's emotions
and the dog would be sad or happy or something
would
depending.
react to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yes, it is.
Um, so when did you start writing? As
When?
as a kid, or
Oh,
because we know from reading you were doing your short stories and stuff while you were in school, and while you were working in corporate communications, you were writing short stories and stuff. When did you start? What got you into writing?
I just always was a writer. I think the way some people are ice skaters, I think there are things that you are just drawn to. consistently until hopefully you get very good at them. I was writing something in the, like this, I guess it was the third grade, and illustrating my story, stuff like that.
What are your what did you like to read when you were growing? Did you like to read mysteries? Is that kind of what fed into your
Yeah,
writing?
yeah, I read a lot. I read kind of anything, but my sister was a nurse, and she read Agatha Christie. She always had the shift for some reason, and there's not a lot going on if you're lucky, so she would sit and read Agatha Christie, and she's the one. She was 20 years older than I am, but she was the one who I think gave me my first Agatha Christie and said, "I think you'll like this," and she was right. Before that, I think everyone goes through this trajectory. They start with Nancy Drew. That's the gateway. And then, try a few other things. But Agatha, I think once you find Murder of Roger Ackroyd or one of those classic stories, you just you are just hooked. She was so very good and so tricky. And at some point I thought maybe I could be almost as tricky too. I want to try to do that.
So your first book was Death of a Cozy Writer.
Mhm.
Do you have something against cozy writers?
No, oh gosh. That my another hero of mine is Robert Bernard, who is no longer living, but he wrote a book called Death of a Writer, I think it was. And it was about this absolutely horrible person who everyone wanted to kill, and someone finally did. And it was just a very well written, very funny book. And I modeled my book on that. I don't mind saying that I didn't, plagiarize or anything. I just
Mhm.
was so full of admiration for that book and a lot of his other books too. Why did I choose a writer? I don't know. I just thought it was funny. It was just a chance to make fun of myself. Writers are pretty interesting people with with superstitions and sort of a manic persistence about us. I mean, it's not a job you say, well, I'm just going to write a book and it'll be great. You have to be so stubborn and not ignore people who try to get in your way, but sort of s- just, I don't know, not believe them or push them aside or something. Say, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to get it published. And then a book after that and a book after that. I'm on like book 16 now. So
Wow.
yeah, it just takes, like I said, there's nothing really, I don't know, you have to really want it to stay with it because it's not an easy industry.
One of the things that I like when I look through people's or writers' websites is some of their marketing stuff that they have. You have a blog on yours. You have some other things. Your contact your email newsletter and stuff. But one
Mhm.
thing that I really enjoy are seeing the authors who have trailers for their books. And you have one for Death of a Cozy Writer. And we're going to go ahead and show that real quick.
Okay.
I like it.
Oh, that was fun. Thank you. I need to do another one. That is the only one in existence, and I need to make a new one. Not for that
um,
book, but for my current book.
So who did that? Did you make that? Did you have
I
somebody make
I
that, or?
I did that. I wrote it. I got the photos from somewhere, and Animoto kind of compiles it for you and does the soundtrack. It's very easy to use, free plug for Animoto, but it was fun to do.
I've seen quite a few from very simple to more elaborate like yours. Then we have one um, in the store, fantasy young adult fantasy writer, dragons and stuff. She animated the whole thing's animated. She did all the animation and things. Actually it's part animation, part real, and her and her friends started it. She's a filmographer, or she does films, but
Photographer.
it's neat to see the different varieties of trailers and stuff. Do you feel that that helps with promoting your book or
I
books?
I I I I couldn't say. I couldn't say if that sells books. I do think people enjoy that kind of thing, and it's become more and more, people are listening to books more than they're reading books, as far as I can tell. It's all kind of shifted to
Mhm.
that side of things. Um, I don't know. I'll have to look up how many, views that has had. I maybe.
I know I did look up you we'll talk about this more a little later, but you do have your books on in audiobook format, and they are
Yeah.
available through our partner book audiobook company that we partner with, Libro FM. So that's very much appreciated. We get the portion of any sales through our link. So
Terrific.
let's go ahead and talk about your Saint Just series, which has Death of a Cozy, Death and the Lit Chick, Death of the Alma Mater, uh, and if there's any others, we can talk about that. But let's start with, how did you come up with the name of Saint Just?
There is a town. He's from Cornwall, and there is a town in Cornwall called, Saint Just, and, it's in Penwith, Cornwall, and it just it seems to be the region my mother's family was from, as far as that can be, traced back. So I just thought that was nice to, hearken back to that. I found out later, actually, that Saint Just was, not really the nicest character in the world. He was a French anarchist, and stole money from his mother and stole this. And I thought, well, too late, because I've I've written this whole book about this guy named Saint Just, who is upright and upstanding in every way.
So let's talk a little bit about your books. Tell us a little bit about each of the books in that series. One thing also that I like is you also have, at least with Death of a Cozy Writer, you have the first chapter on there so people can read the first chapter. Do you have that with all the books?
I think I think I do. I might. Yes. Um, all of the books. Someone else noticed this before I did. They all concern writers. This Death and the Lit Chick, obviously, another writer. The third one, I hadn't been aware that I, featured another writer who turned out to be a love interest of Saint Just, but that's what she's doing in there. She, becomes a continuing character. The fourth book, and this is very timely for me, because just this morning I sent the edited version of Saint Just number 4 to my editor, and that one is called Death in Cornwall. So we're keeping the, death of, death in, death at kind of theme going, and that one will be out later this year. And in that one, it's not the murder of a writer, but there is a romance writer that I have a bit of fun with. Writers are fun to write about. They're so full of themselves, you know?
So in the new one, it's a story in which Saint Just is on holiday with Portia Dianth. Did I say that right?
Death, yes. And there's a
Uh,
story behind that name too, I'll tell you later.
yeah, in the beautiful seaside Cornish village of Maidesville. Once again, murder disrupts their plan for a peaceful escape. So what's behind the names?
Well, Diath is the name of the bursar at my college in Oxford. It's DE apostrophe ATH, which, having once seen that name, that's gonna end up in a murder mystery. It's unavoidable. It's just such a great name. It's Ath, and I assume Ath is a place in France somewhere. I never tracked it down. He was a very nice man, and I'm sure he never minded that I used his name a few years later.
Do any of your other characters' names have significance? Like, for example, there's a movie back in the early '90s called Demolition Man, and it was Sandra Bullock and Sylvester Stallone. Well, Sandra Bullock's character was Lenina Huxley, and the movie itself is dystopian. It's kind of like Brave New World that Aldous Huxley wrote, and so the writers of the movie chose the name for her character, Lenina being the main character in A Brave New World, and Huxley in homage to Aldous Huxley. So that was her name. Do any of your names have significance, something like that, or how did you
Um,
come up with your names?
I would have to think back on that. In the most current book, I went to a website that had typical Cornish names, and I tried to use as as much of that as I could. Some of the names are just about unpronounceable, and so I picked the simplest ones just to give it the flavor of being about Cornish characters. Was this book, this story that Sandra Bullock was in? Was this a serious? I haven't seen it. Is it serious or is it comedy?
No,
I don't know.
it's thriller. Uh, um, yeah, dystopian. It's about a serial killer who
Oh,
blows up a building. Sylvester Stallone, he's a police officer. He captures him, but he gets into trouble, and they're frozen for years. And later on, San Diego, Santa Monica, and Los Angeles kind of combine cities into this one futuristic city that's now everything's all good, everything's all nice, everybody follows this one sort of leader, but then there's this little rebel group that tries to break through, and so it's very Brave New World, Big Brother, dystopian type. It was really good movie. A lot of action, a lot of things blowing up, and you know,
okay.
Sylvester Stallone.
I'll try to catch.
Action.
I tend to watch everything that she's in because I just enjoy her. But the ones that stand out in my mind are the ones where she was the beauty contestant. I can't think of the name of that right
Miss
now.
Congeniality.
That was just hilarious. It was a
Yep.
ridiculous movie, and it's one of my favorites. Naturally, it's
I
just
think
so
this.
funny.
I think this was one of her first ones. I know she was in Potion number Love Potion number 9 or something like that,
Mm.
where she kind of got her start. But this is one of her second, third films, so she's still kind of a breakthrough actress at that time. But
I
it was really good. So you set all your, and this is also with the other series. You set them in England.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you like the Anglo history and stuff, and that's kind of where your family or your ancestors are from. Is that the only reason, or was it just sort of what were some other reasons you set it over there?
Oh, it's probably the love of Agatha Christie meshed with, uh, I don't know, admiration for the country. I know it's, people living there say, "What are you talking about?" But I just I've always loved England. It's just some combination of factors. I can't really trace it back because neither of my parents had this, bug that I have. My mother was big on the Far East and collectibles and all of that kind of thing from there, but it just I couldn't tell you, their use of language I just thought was unique and, exemplified again by Robert Bernard, among other people. Martha Grimes is another one, but she's an American, actually, writing a book set in England. Elizabeth George, who we share an agency, me and Elizabeth George, and I would love to talk to her one day. I just admire her books so much. Um, but what was the question? Oh, England. Well, it's changing now, though. As I just signed a two-book contract for books set in the United States. And I almost feel like this I'm evolved now. I can write about where I live. We'll see. That's what I'm doing. I live in a very interesting town and I've never written about it.
So I did notice though that you have UK versions, and I've always wondered this too. What's the difference between the UK versions of your book and the US versions?
That's kind of a publishing thing. The books were published. My other books were all published in the U.S. initially, and England, Little Brown in the UK picked up the rights to those books to publish there. They put a new cover on it, which was basically a photocopy of the book. I was expecting they would change the spelling of things and anything else that wasn't very British. They would change all that. No, they just it's a reprint basically of the American version with a new cover, and that's what they're all doing over there in the UK. I have no idea why Americans don't just ship their books to London. I mean, it would be easier, you would think, but they don't. They sell the rights, and someone else takes care of it from that end. And right now, I have a British publisher, so I'm doing this all in reverse suddenly, and it comes out in Britain and it comes to the U.S. a couple months later.
Yeah, that's one thing. As a bookseller, we have customers coming to us and say we'd like this particular book, but then when I go to search for it and to get it, I find out that it's only published in the UK and it's not going to be published here for a few months later.
Mm.
So you got to say, well, you can either get it on that platform that shall not be named, you can get the British version, or you can wait a few months and we can get it then.
Wait
But
and get it.
so Book List gave you a starred review for um, your Saint Just Mysteries, and the reader who hasn't yet discovered Malliet's Saint Just Mystery series has a real treat in store. Longtime cozy fans will be reminded of Golden Age classics starring Dorothy Sayers, Harriet Vane, and Edmund Crispin's Gervais Fenn. Malliet's writing is both smooth and elegant, and her humor delicious. So going back to the traditional, how does this make this this series cozy, not cozy?
Cozy, not cozy. Well, this is tied in very much with the Malice Domestic Convention, from which I won the Agatha Award. And their definition of a cozy is a book without excessive gore, excessive violence, excessive sex, excessive anything. These are Agatha Christie kind of books. A swear word or two, fine, but nothing really. I'm trying to think of a book that's full of swear words, and I can't. But it's not the kind of thing. It's not really a thriller type genre. It's strictly Tea with the Vicar kind of thing, updated to the present day.
Now, do you have a cover yet for cover art yet for the fourth book?
I just saw that is being debated. I just saw 2 samples today, and with Cornwall as the setting, they have a nice palette there to work with, and talking with my agent, change the font kind of things. This is the fun part. You get to be artistic for a moment, and you do have some say over what the book looks like. Not total, but you have some input on what it looks like.
So your other series is the Max Tudor series, and where we're talking about English settings and English villages and stuff. This one here, on your website, you actually have a full-size map of the village. Who drew that? Who came up with that idea?
That's Rhys Davies who drew that map, and another one for my 4th book. That's commissioned by the publisher, and I was really grateful that they did that. My acquiring editor commissioned him to do the village map, which is absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, here, there it is right
Can you
there.
see it? Oh,
Bit,
yeah. Okay, there it is. Yeah. That's like the inside pages, end pages for the book. When the very first thing you open up to, it's glued to the back of the cover, and so that's how they introduce the story, and I think it's glorious. I'm very happy with that map.
Yeah, it's great detail and everything. So
Manor House, yeah.
That's what that is, the manor house.
Yeah, yeah.
So where does the story mainly take place? Down in the manor house, or more in the town?
And that was a bit of an artistic invention there. That Manor House didn't turn up until about the third book, but the story takes place. It's a very small village, and the vicar is former MI5, and he comes. It's a fictional village. It's basically on the south coast of England, more or less Dorset or Devon area. If you know the area, it's gorgeous. So they're not far from the sea, and so that the story takes place in in the bakery or in the vicarage or in the church or something. Just these little settings that a village of less than 250 people will have, fewer than 250. Um, in one, just to get Max out of the village, I do send him to the seashore, and I put him on a yacht, and I do different things with him. It's like playing with dolls almost. You get to move your characters around. It's fun.
Did you model these characters after um, real life people, or any of their names after people you know?
Max Tudor just was sort of cobbled together from my love of the Tudor. Not love is not a word you use with Henry VIII, is it? But my my interest in the Tudor area, and Max, I just thought it was a cool name. But Nether Monkslip is the name of his village, and that was another search through names of British villages, which some of Nether this and that is pretty common. So I wanted that word, and Monkslip is a couple other names I cobbled together. So Nether Monkslip, and that just became the village. When you found it after a lot of dithering and research, that was the name. Um, as to Max himself, he is based on my having met two or three people who were either working for the CIA or the FBI, and were also or priests, or they gave up being CIA, FBI, and became a priest, or they one of them that I met actually was a coroner, but he was also like a part-time priest, and I all of this was new to me. I didn't grow up in the Anglican tradition, so I didn't know any of this was allowed. I thought you could be a priest or not a priest. You couldn't be two or three things, as these guys were managing to do. The one that became, not in looks or anything, or even in character, but he became Max Tudor, um, based on because he was stationed in Tehran at the time of the hostage crisis, and was horrified by all of that, very very deeply shaken. I can imagine if you were actually there. He wasn't one of the hostages, but he was somehow, very close to that situation. And when he got out of there alive, he thought, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to become a priest, and that's what he did. Eventually, they called him back. He left. I think he was CIA. He left, and they called him back because of his language skills. He spoke Farsi, and they needed those people. So the translators. So he came back, and then sort of started counseling people as a priest within the building, the physical building. Um, it's a fascinating career progression, but he managed to put all of his skills to work that way. He did not want to go back, I don't think, but he just felt like he had to.
Mhm. Now, are your books a standalone, or do they need to be read in order? Are there I mean, because you have so many in both series. Obviously, the characters grow as your series progresses. But is somebody able to grab like the third one, start reading and say, "Oh, you know what? Right, well, let me go back to the first one, and start reading, all of them," or do they really need to start with the first one?
I like to think that you can jump in anywhere, but with uh, the Max Tudor series, I would start with the first one because it gives you the village setting very clearly established, kind of an
Mhm.
establishing shot for the rest of the series. Death of a Cozy Writer, the the detective, it's a DCI, Detective St. Just. He's based in Cambridge, England, but so far he has not really stayed in Cambridge. So each story is a bit oh, here we are in Scotland. You have to do the setting and explain who everybody is. So it's always kind of a new thing with him. The only thing that's changed really is that he is now engaged to Portia, solidly engaged to Portia in the fourth book, and that's going to, become a relationship, but it's never, the main point of the story. It's always the crime and solving the crime.
So you're how many books are in it in the Max Tudor series?
There's 7 of those, and 3, well, now 4, 3 and a
Mhm.
half St.
Three and
John's
a half.
Wood. It's the funniest feeling. I mean, like I said, just today I sent that off, and it was a very complicated story, and I do hope that I have solved the problem of people's ages. It gets very complicated that you have a character who has a child, and you have to make sure you're accounting for this, that she's not having a child at the age of 12 or something weird like that.
Right.
She's having a child at 21 or 22. And because it becomes part of the story, you have to know what age all these people are at a certain point in time. I finally actually resorted to a spreadsheet. There is an Excel spreadsheet out there that you can download and put in a birth date, and it will tell you the age of the person. And you do that for like 10 characters, and it's really helpful to make sure that everybody makes sense. I wish I would tell you the name of the website where I found it, but if you Google it, that's what I learned with this book. I'd never done that before.
Going back to Monk Slip real quick. Um, a series that I had done in a writer series I did it back in February. It's called Pharaoh Feb. So it stands for Fantasy Romance February. So instead of doing,
Okay.
Valentine's Day is in February and all that kind of stuff, a local author here in New Hampshire started it. And through another author that knows the both of us, connected me with her and kind of piggybacked on her event. And I interviewed a lot of fantasy romance writers, and a couple of them did. We didn't talk too much about it, but I found a little bit about world building, and some of them had built worlds. I mean, you're talking fantasies with the forests and the mountains and the castles and all that kind of real fantasy stuff. Um, how did you go about building this town or this village? Is it based on a conglomeration of a bunch of English towns, or was just completely made up? And how was that process fitting all the streets and naming the streets and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that was so much fun, and I think that's very similar to the fantasy writer building a world. In my case, Agatha Christie again, always often used St. Mary Mead for her Miss Marple stories, and it was, the classic thing, was the butcher, the baker, the person who ran the post office, all the things that are to make a village self-contained. There are all these little shops before, all the Sainsbury's and things came along. That's how people lived. The candlestick maker, probably. Um, so that I could sort of picture it. I remember drawing. I do have a hand drawn map. That's the artist used to make that finished map. And believe me, there's a mile of difference between those two things. But I was sketching it out in pencil just to keep straight. You know, when I was describing, oh, this is next to the vicarage, or it's across the street, or there's a restaurant down on the river. So I could picture it in my mind and be able to, without going into too much detail for the reader, put them, in space and insert them into the village as much as I could. So yeah, maps are helpful right from the start. Um, this romance thing I is still, I'm sure you know this, the best-selling category of book. I think that's worldwide. And that is, I don't read romance, and I don't read fantasy for that matter. That's a whole other world to me. I was looking at some statistics the other day, and there is a category called, uh, male harem stories. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Me either. Uh, it's just it's crazy, but there are all these subcategories of romance, and that's one of them. Um, God love them, readers. Whatever you want to read, go right ahead. It's just, like I said, it's just not my area.
Right, right. I've done well over 50 of these interviews since last July, since everything shut down and we couldn't have in-person stuff. And I found out about Zoom and stuff. But I've realized I did the fantasy romance one back in December of last year. I did a horror thriller writers. We have
Ooh,
a local publisher who does those, and trying to help him out because every year they do a thing in October at the Haverhill Public Library down in Haverhill, Mass. But they couldn't do it last year, so I did an event with a number of their horror writers and did these things.
that's
But
great.
yeah, the thing I found with that one, the Pharaoh Feb, with this one here, is that there are subgenres of subgenres of subgenres of genres.
Yeah, yeah,
It's amazing because when I think of fantasy, when I think of romance, I think of Fabio and the White Horse with the hair flowing, running, down the
yeah,
beach thing. And
yeah.
I never got into that. But realizing that after doing those and getting into it, things like the Hunger Games, Twilight, um, those are considered fantasy romance. They
Mhm.
like I said, the ones where there's castles and even with dragons and stuff, as long as the main element is the romance part, you can have it all. And they didn't focus too much on like sci-fi romance, which has more of the mechanical, like Star Wars type thing. But it was pretty interesting, and that's the one thing I found out about these mysteries, is that there's so many subgenres of even just cozies.
There are
There's
endless
crime, there's
permu
thriller.
Yep, yeah. Well, there's not well, I guess there's thriller cozy.
Not,
They
not well,
will
not necessarily cozies, but
yeah.
I'm just meaning in the mystery world.
Oh, yeah, it's
But there's crime, there's noir. Found out what that was, and
well, yeah, tell me. Again, that's not I don't I do read a lot of other type mystery, like I read The Girl on the Train, which I loved. Um, I just thought that was a fascinating character who was so unreliable inside her own head. You couldn't quite be sure if you should believe what she was telling you. She believed it, or
mhm,
thought maybe she did. I do love that kind of, I guess we call that a thriller story. I love the domestic noir things which started with Rebecca. All of that can be traced back to Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca. But I tend to have stayed in my niche where I was successful. I'm branching out a little bit now, but um, what am I saying? I just don't do the gory stuff.
right,
I'm not interested. And watching television is an experiment in terror. Sometimes you never know what they're going to throw at you. You're watching a pleasant little story, and then someone's decapitated or something. It's like, please
right.
don't do that to me. Um, but
So
yeah,
in
there's
that,
more branches.
so in 2017, October 2017, you came up with a standalone suspense novel called Wacom, or is it
Yeah,
Wycombe?
wake them.
Wacom.
Yeah.
And tell us about that. Plus, you also donated $5,000 of the proceeds from the sale of the book to the American Red Cross, to aid the
Mhm.
victims of Hurricane Harvey and some other natural disasters.
Yeah,
Tell
yeah.
us about how that all came about and the story itself.
That was a drop in the bucket, but that area is so inundated every year. But it's just something I wanted to do,
Mhm.
and I hope it bought some blankets or whatever that they needed. Wakeham was one of these stories. It was a bit based on my time in England. It was more non-cozy than the other stories. It was definitely a standalone, and it was just a character that intrigued me, and I wanted to write it. The publisher of that and the first three St. Just books, in fact, stopped publishing mysteries. So that book is not available now. And I got my rights back to it and I thought, well, I'll self-publish it. And of course, it's not as easy as it sounds to self-publish, and I just never got around to it. But that story I would love to revisit, maybe edit it down a bit to, take out probably 30 pages it didn't need and go out with that again one day. It's one of these one-day projects.
What's the premise of the book?
Well, it's an American living in England, and her she begins to suspect her husband. There is a murder committed in her neighborhood, and she gets involved in the investigation. I can't say too much more about it. If anyone should find a rare copy of it, they might want to read it.
So how does it differ from your other ones? Is it a little more on the graphic side than your other series, or just darker in general, or how does it
Uh,
differ?
it's it's darker. That's the psychology of this character is darker, but it was also when you're writing a book and you know it's going to be a series or you hope it's going to be a series, you construct it differently and leave it a bit open-ended so that you can carry on with the next book. This book had an ending, and there was no going back. That was the ending, done. So
In your other two series, did you know that those two were going to be series?
yeah, I hope so. That this is you probably know this is a publishing thing. They want a series. It's easier to sell a series than to start from the ground up each time with a new book with a even who's the famous standalone type writer, Tess Gerritsen. Would you classify her that way? uh, in a way, she's become a name unto herself. So people will see her name on the book and buy it. They kind of don't care. But usually you have to sell, you enjoyed this book, so you're really going to love this second book. It's a marketing strategy.
Right.
They want to keep that going so that people like you can keep the shelves stocked.
Tess Garrison is coming out with a new book in July. I think it's mid-July, and we're going to have the honor of interviewing her. We've already have it set up, and
Oh,
um,
I did not know. I was not setting you up for that. I
yeah,
did not
no,
know. How lucky. Great.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
As my wife's a huge fan of hers, and
Yeah.
the show that was revolves around her Rizzoli and Isles characters books. Um,
Okay,
we did it.
those are series, yeah.
Yeah, we did. We work not closely, but we've worked over the past few years that we've been open with Sisters in Crime New England and doing some of their panels of workshops. And of course, last year was all in Zoom. And I met a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he is writing a book with, or he wrote a book with Tess Gerritsen. So I'm going to have both of them uh, the end of July, 26, 28, something like that. We'll be doing a Zoom event and talking about the new book. So I'm really excited about that. So everybody out there, I hope you join us. It'll be on our website pretty soon, as soon as I get a hard date.
And this will be on Facebook as well, will it?
Yep,
Okay, I'll be
yep.
looking for that too.
Cool,
That's
cool.
great.
Um, so um, how long do you think your series will go? Well, actually, when you're writing your two different series, do you go a book and then go to the other series, then back to the other one, go back to the other, and just keep going back and forth, or do you write a couple in each one, then go to do some more on the other one?
Oh gosh, well, hmm, that hasn't really been a factor in my career to date. Um, what I'm doing right, I am gonna have a very busy year. As I said, I just signed a contract for 2 books in a brand new series. In in among all of that is a book that's it's pretty much a standalone. It has the potential for a series, but this book I kind of unearthed in my computer during the pandemic. It gave you a lot of free time to sort of housekeep in a way. And here was this book. When I came back to it not too long ago, I thought there's 300 pages almost ready to go here. I don't know why I abandoned it, but I did. I just So here I am with an almost complete book. I will send to my agent and say, what do you think? I don't know when I'm going to write this, but if you can sell it, I'll write it at some point in the future. So,
Well, the reason I ask is we have a couple writers, or one in particular, a friend of mine. He writes these great thriller, uh, this real nice like CIA type, FBI type thrillers, and but then he says he gets bored with it after writing a couple or three of them. So then he goes and he shifts to either a standalone book or another series. He kind of gets bored with that one, and he tries to keep things so that he keeps things fresh, just being a writer, keeping things fresh. Do you feel you need to do that, or
I think it's really easy for a series to go stale. If the writer is bored with it, it will show. I totally believe that. Now, if he's self-published, that problem is solved. Usually, you're a bit at the mercy of what the publisher wants, what they will buy. And I have several friends. I don't know if you know Edith Maxwell. I think she juggles. She's from the Sisters in Crime chapter you just mentioned, New England Sisters in Crime. She has at least two, maybe three series going, and how she does it, I can't imagine. She's publishing two books a year, I believe, at least. Sheila Connolly from your area. Um, she died not about 2 years ago. Really, really sad. But she was the most productive writer of all of us, and she had three books coming out a year somehow. Now, again, Agatha Christie at her peak could do three books a year, and even she, had to stop doing that. It just pushes you too hard.
mhm. How many do you put out a year, and or what's your comfort where you feel that you're being pushed too far?
You know what? I think the wisdom is one book a year, but I think I can do better than that. And I feel I'm a little bit changed by the pandemic in terms of we do not have an endless amount of time, and I can't say, "Oh, I'll do that next year." I really am in the mood to write as much as I possibly can and get it out there as quickly as I can without having the quality affected.
Right, right.
It's a
Um,
trade-off.
so, well, speaking of Sisters in Crime, you were a former board member of Sisters in Crime National,
Yeah.
and you're also a member of the Mystery Writers of America. Or are you still a member of the Mystery Writers of America, International Thriller Writers, and the U.S. chapter of the UK's Crime Writers Association? Do you still belong to any of those? And
Yeah.
how has the pandemic, as we're speaking of the pandemic, uh, affected being part of those organizations?
You just reminded me I owe, MWA my dues, and I think I think I'll have to write them a check very soon, or I won't be a member. Um, but, uh, the pandemic, what it did, and this has been, the good side of it. There have been a lot of events like this, a lot of Zoom events. All the chapters are doing this, and they're bringing in experts in the mystery field of on poisons, guns, ballistics, anything you can name, and they're broadcasting from California, say, and I'm tuning in from the East Coast, and it's been actually wonderful because before that, I just found it hard to get to the meetings. I live in a very congested area, and on a Saturday morning, knowing it would be like 4 hours out of my day to get to, Reston or wherever it was in Virginia. Um, I just couldn't do it. So I missed a lot of that. But this now I can go to monthly meetings if I just by turning on my computer. It's been wonderful, really helpful. And I hope they continue to do it.
So some of those things that you said, the poisons and weapons and things like that, is that things that to help you add to your book, or ways to research that subject matter for your books?
Yes, very much so. Lucy Zaray, I think, is the she calls herself the poison lady. Uh, she's someone you can I have written to and said, "Is it what is the dosage of aconite?" Or say, these are strange conversations, but you try to get the details right without just writing a recipe for some kind of crazed person out there who might run with it. I don't know. They can probably look it up for themselves these days. But one thing I'm doing at the moment, coincidentally, is University of Cambridge is offering an online course in forensics. And fortunately, I made sure you don't have to write a paper to be part of this course because I had enough writing to do. But it's simply an online course in you're shown a scene and you're given the knowledge to solve or collect clues and maybe solve the murder. It's really pretty fun.
Hmm. So when you're doing research for your book for different things like weapons, poisons, clues, things like that, what type of um, platforms do you use? A lot of Googling, library, uh, to research things for your book.
The Googling. I haven't set foot in a library in about 14 months, but I, you know, uh, typically I will Google. It's really been a godsend. I tend not to get into guns and things, although I seem to be friends with a lot of FBI types who know all about ballistics, and I can ask them, or at least show them something I've written, and they can tell me if it's impossible or if I got that detail right. But mostly I avoid using anything but poisons or knives because I can understand those weapons.
Mhm.
As simple-minded as it sounds, if I get into calling a revolver something that it's not, you will get caught out very quickly if you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Do you have people that you know who work for, like MI5, who's one of your characters in your books, or the CIA, or anything like that that you can refer to? Or
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a writing group, and one of the members is former FBI, so he's a ready resource and always helpful. His name is Jeffrey Higgins, and he just published a book called give me a minute, I'll come back to it. His name is Jeffrey James Higgins, and his book is out there, and it's definitely a thriller, and uh, it is not for the faint-hearted. It's in that category that is different from mine.
Mhm. um, so writers groups. It must be the same thing with like the Mystery Writers of American stuff. Do you still keep in touch with the writers groups? Had you found it easier to do it now during pandemic than pre-pandemic, or do you miss the pre-pandemic in person getting together with writers groups?
Oh gosh, that's a tough question. That really is. I'm I'm a by nature an introvert, and I think I prefer the kind of Zoom has. I just love this. This is fine with me. There are a lot of the group has 10 to 12 people. It fluctuates, 8 to 12 people, and you can tell the ones that are just dying to get together in that little restaurant we used to meet in on Wednesday nights and have dinner and talk, show each other our pages and comment on the writing. And the rest of us are just a bit, there is a real concern about the virus popping back up again and kind of personal preference. I'm really happy to see people on Zoom and not have to be out in traffic at any point of
Mhm.
the day. Yeah. I'm almost
So,
getting to be a recluse.
so Jeffrey James Higgins, is it Furious Sailing into Terror?
That's it. That's it. That's it. And
Looks
again,
like he
not for
has.
the faint of heart, but he's a very good writer.
Uh-huh. I'll have to check him out. There's another one, Unseen, Evil Lurks Among Us. That sounds interesting.
I love that.
Um, so when you start writing, when you sit down and start writing for the day, what's your process? Do you like in the morning? Do you like in the afternoon? Whenever something inspires you, you just kind of run to your desk and sit down and start writing, computer, handwriting. How do you start? What's your process?
Mhm. Yeah, I think I started I was a bit precious about this, and I had to have a special notebook and a pen and all of that kind of thing, and anymore, the computer is so much more efficient. I don't know how people ever wrote a book before the computer. I can't imagine that. I try to get to my desk by, say, 10. My husband and I tend to go out for a walk, and in the summer, the earlier you get out there, the better. So I'm back at home by 10. There's always some kind of email to deal with. It's not like you just plunge into your writing, and it takes a certain amount of discipline not to get too dragged into that. So I tell myself, all right, by 12, no matter what is going on, by 12, I'm going to be back in the manuscript. And that's what I do. So I'm at my desk maybe 7 hours a day, but 5 of those are writing the actual book, 5 or 6 on a good day.
That sounds like me in the morning too. We open the store at 10 o'clock, but between getting the computer fired up, going through all the emails, checking on orders, scrolling through Facebook, well, actually putting
Yeah.
out the posts of what we have new coming up, or either coming up for events or new books on the shelf. Then I find myself scrolling through Facebook, maybe the news. It's about noontime by the time I actually get to do some work, unless some customers come in. So on your computer, do you use particular programs? And there's a couple out there. One's called Scrivener. There was another one that somebody mentioned the other day, kind of similar to that, or you just use basic like Word and just start writing.
Oh, basically Word. Scrivener was a little too complex for me. To keep the characters straight, I downloaded something called Plotter, Plottr, and you're meant to use it to plot your book. I haven't used it that way, but it does have a feature where you can keep your characters together. And Alice has red hair, and Jeanette has blonde hair, and she's 5'7". All the little details, age and height and things. And I use that just as sort of an organizational tool, but I don't write in it per se. Just good old Microsoft Word is it. As I told you, I broke into the Excel frontier today doing that age chart, and that was such a godsend, really, to not have to do the math on, someone born in 1971. How old are they? Quick, they're 50. All right, but it gets much more complicated once you bring in their grandchildren and so on.
Mhm. Some of the authors I've talked to, they have like family charts. Is that something that you thought about doing, or is it
Mm.
necessary for your seems where you have like what, 7 books now in one of your series? Do you need like that family chart for people to keep track of who's who and who's with whom?
Oh, you mean like a family tree?
Family tree,
Oh,
yeah.
I don't really, but what I would advise anybody starting out, especially if they think they're writing the first book in a series, is write down all the physical characteristics of the main characters. At least, I would be sure you keep a diary of that, book to book, um, because otherwise, like the Saint Just I returned to after 10 years, and all I could remember was that he was a large, tall man, and I had to go look up his eye color and things. You just forget after such a time. And sometimes I've seen authors forget within the pages of the same book. The eyes that were blue are now gray or something. So you have to keep all of that straight. Um, and I wish I'd been more of a bookkeeping type from the beginning, as just keeping a record of those kinds of things, especially eye color.
So what happens when you get to a spot where you said, "Uh-oh, I don't think that's right."
Oh, man. You mean in terms of the physical appearance or something, or what
Something,
happened?
or be with the town or with a character, or something with the plot, and you say, "Uh-oh, I don't think that's right," and you got to go back. How big of a chunk have you ever had to remove or rewrite because
Right, right.
of something that you remembered that from that
Y
ended up? You know what I mean?
Yes, yes. I'm lucky that I have a really good editor. This is at Severn House, which is a subsidiary of Canongate. These are Scottish and English people. He was very, very good and spotted a couple of things that I had lost track of at some point. And I said, yes, you're right. That makes no sense at all. Thank you for pointing that out before it got out there into the world. But that's, that's kind of his job, but it's basically, my job to catch it first. Just you get so, especially since tend to have a lot of characters, it's very hard to keep track of. It is, and he caught a couple of things very good, and then it goes to a person beyond him, for the kind of eagle-eye person who will really zero in on it and see anything else that might be wrong. And then it comes back to me, and I get yet another shot at it. Um, I think that was the surprising thing to me about being published. It's not like you just write the book, send it off, and then go on to the next book. You never get rid of the thing. It just comes back and it goes back. I thought we were done. No, it's back. Um, I think that's why I've never gone back and reread any of my books, like ever, because you're so thoroughly done with them by the time you're you're through this process.
Mhm, mhm. So do you have the same initial editor for all the books in that series so that they're familiar with the series to catch something like that? Or is it different
Yeah.
people who read it and just but they've read your books or something?
Well, I've had okay, in a way, I've had four publishers. Three, let's say, the books appearing in the U.S. from three different publishers. The first publisher was Midnight Ink, and they no longer are publishing. They're still in business. It's Llewellyn, and they publish all manner of things, including New Age, which was their roots about 100 years ago. So anyway, that all the books from Midnight Ink are not in existence. Uh, I got the rights back. They're my books. The next series was Minotaur, which is out of Macmillan, and they did the Max Tudor books. And I'll be returning to those, one way or the other. I'm going to do a Max number 8, but this year, probably not. Um, so the current publisher for St. Just is Severn House, Canongate, and the two books I just said I just sold. The new series is also from them. But as you pointed out, there's Little Brown is over there reprinting uh, Max Tudor and St. Just. And so that's four publishers, right?
Mm,
And someday that all needs to get sorted out because it doesn't confuse the buyer. I don't think people really pay attention. Is this book from Minotaur or not? I'm not going to buy it if it's not. But
mhm.
you have to have availability, and right now I need to make sure those books get out into the world, so that if anyone does want to read them, they can find them.
Right, right. Believe it or not, there are a few people like that who look for specific publishers of specific titles.
Really?
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
had it. There's a couple customers that we have, regular customers who look for used copies and they say, I want this one from this publisher, sometimes a year as well, because it may have a different cover art, and they like the cover art on that version
Mhm.
versus a different publisher's version, or maybe it's more rare or something. I don't ask why. I just okay, I'll look for it.
The collectors, yeah, that's a whole other thing. Robin Agnew, who owned Aunt Agatha's in another state, um, is she's retired now, but she's selling books on different covers. I mean, she obviously has a vast store of these things and all the like 1950s noir covers. I mean, they're really fun because they're just so bad. They're just awful. The artwork is just terrible. But there will be 3 or 4 versions of the same book, and it's just fun, and I'm sure people do collect them. They just want every, version of that book. I've never gotten into collecting like that. Maybe one day.
Now, some of your older books, have they come out in like a second printing or a second edition or something that have where the cover art has changed, or is everything all still the
Mhm.
same? Or when it went from publisher to publisher, changed publisher's hand, did they change the cover art or anything in it?
I can show you maybe if I can. Okay. Um, this was, can you see this?
Hmm.
This was the
Yep.
first version of Death and the Lit Chick. And I think by anyone's definition, it's pretty bad. It's like all the clip art in the world ended up on this cover. Sorry. It just, I can say that now because they're out of business and they don't care, right? But the other one, oh, I can't find it, but it was much more stylized and it got rid of all the clutter and it was a much better cover. So out in the world are two versions of this book. And that might be fun for a collector. Don't know. Sorry, I can't find the other one. I didn't expect this to come up. But yeah, they did. Honestly, the first book ever of mine, I had this idea for what the cover should be, and I sent them a sketch of it, and it was awful. And I'm so glad they didn't go with that. You know, cooler heads prevailed, and they just did this very simple thing of a pen with blood coming out of it, or something like that, for a death
This
of a
one here.
classic writer. Death and yeah, there it is. Where is this? Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's the cleaned up version with the bottle. I don't know what the bottle has to do with it, but it's a much better uh, thing than this, which I just always thought was just weird.
Well, it's a wine bottle, and then the cork says a Saint Just Mystery.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I like that, and
Yeah.
I like the whatever they call the particular text. There's so how many 200 different ways to write letters, and each one has a different, New Times Roman and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's some gothic thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
yeah.
that cover was a step up. It's definitely. But the cover thing is really important. And nowadays, what you have to think about too is, okay, you've got this gorgeous cover. A lot of money went into creating it, perhaps, but once you shrink it for the website, is anyone going to be able to tell what that is? And that came up in today's discussion. Will anyone be able to read um, the title? You
Mm,
know, will it just be sort of a blur of blues and greens, or will it be evidently a fishing village, which is what it's meant to portray? Because no one's going to bother to, blow up the cover and really look at it if you've got to catch their attention very quickly when they're scrolling through a column of books.
right. So are you a pantser or a plotter? Because you had mentioned plotting things out earlier. But
Yeah.
that's two terms that I learned way at the beginning. And what is that? What I'm finding though, at least with mystery writers, is it's most are a combination of, because there's so many things to keep, clues and things to keep track of, who the murderer is, who the victims are, some of the side
Right.
characters, that there has to be some plotting involved, some outlining involved. But for the most part, characters just sort of just kind of run away and make the story themselves.
Yeah, I'm probably kind of a hybrid writer. I will start uh, just sort of go, start page one and go. And about this happened with my very first book. I remember it very clearly. I got to page 50 and I didn't know what this was all about. I was enjoying it, but I had no killer in mind. I just didn't know what the ending was going to be. And it's taken me a while to realize you've got to know what the ending is. Otherwise you've created months more work for yourself. You really have. So at that point, and it's usually pretty much the same story, um, I'll stop and start, really to analyze, where am I going with this? Sometimes I have to decide who is going to be killed and how to attack that middle, which is really the bane of every writer. You hit page 150 and the thing is dragging, and you just know you're losing the reader's attention. So something has to keep it boiling, or something has to really really happen right about then. And you have to plot for that. I don't think you just stumble into that.
Mhm. Now, when you're all done, you got your first draft done. You mentioned that it goes to your editor and then it comes back. Keeps going back and forth. But how many times do you go through and edit before you turn it in for that initial
Oh man.
publisher's editor?
Um, Kind of endless times. I think this latest book was I try to hand it in polished, almost like I don't want them changing it, and I want them to pretty much publish it at it as is. So, me it's not like I start at the beginning and revise, beginning, revise, edit, edit. I'm editing as I go, and probably before I send it off to anybody, I've read it, 3 times. Maybe not in sequence, but 3 times I've read the whole book. I really do have that pride of ownership. I don't wanna hand in something that makes an editor go, "Who hired her?" Just you you want to avoid that at all costs, and I my books pretty much made it through without without any revision, any major
Mhm.
revisions.
Do you
I
have
just
do you have friends and family who help beta read it, or beta readers? Do you use when you have a technical portion of it for say MI5 or your CIA FBI thing? Do you have somebody with that expertise read that section or read it in general just to see if everything's technically correct before you hand it into the publisher?
I don't really my books are not based too much in reality, so there's not a lot of need for that. The occasional question to someone, suffices without showing them pages of the work. I don't my husband sees the book when it's been printed because I value my marriage and I really don't care what he thinks. I don't wanna hear, "Oh, I didn't like chapter 4," because too bad, it's done now, it's written, I can't bear to look at it anymore
Mhm.
is what happens. So I just it goes out into the world without, beta readers. My writing group has looked at a couple of my short stories, and that's kind of the extent of that. Um, because to have someone judging an entire book, ooh, especially when what can happen is they'll say, I really don't like what you had, that scene in chapter 5. I don't think that works. And it turns out that that may be the best part of the book because everybody's got an opinion, about it. And um, once it gets out there in the world with the reviewers and so on, you'll hear from them. You don't need to expose it early to any ridicule or you know whatever they've got in store for you.
So when you hear from your fans and readers, have you ever gotten the why did you
Uh,
discontinue, kill off that character? I really like that character, or the opposite. Can you please kill off that character? I hate that character.
no, really I don't. I killed a character in the second Max Tudor that apparently someone had grown attached to and thought I was really cruel to kill her. That was Katrina McPherson who thought that. And it wasn't like, a complaint or outrage or anything, but, that surprised me because to me, they're just I don't know, they're almost like chess pieces. I didn't realize that anyone would look at this and say, "Gosh, that was mean." I just saw it as expedient, to be honest.
Mhm, mhm. So, any of your short stories, do you your short stories, do you think of ever going back to some of them? And when you're just ready to take a break from one of the series, go to one of your short stories and say and read it and say, you know what, let's expand on this and see if I can make a standalone out of this and publish it as a
Uh,
standalone.
that's what's happening with the 8th Max Tutor. Yeah, that started out as a short story and sort of grew to novella form and now could easily be a a full-length novel. It's just a matter of my paying attention to it.
Mhm. So the books are out, ebooks probably, or ebooks are out, but audiobooks
Mhm.
are out. How is that process in audiobooks? Did you go to the publisher and say, "Hey, let's try the audiobook thing"? Did they come to you and say, "We want to put these in audiobooks"?
Oh, they publishers have, realized pretty quickly that, people want audiobooks. It's surprisingly, during the pandemic, audiobook sales went up,
Mhm.
but it traditionally as people in cars with a long commute listening to audiobooks. That's part of the package very much. I never had to suggest it. They know their business there, and they whoever has the rights to them, that becomes part of the contract. But uh, they get sold uh, pretty automatically. All of my books have been on audio. Yeah,
I found,
which is good. I'm not an
yeah,
audio listener, so I don't understand that. I don't pay a lot of attention.
I never was either until I started the store, and then, like I said, we partner with Libro FM, and your audiobooks are
Mhm.
available through them. So we have an affiliate link to them. Go to our webpage, go to our link, and then we get a portion of sales, memberships, things like that. But once a month, they send us a handful of sort of like advanced listening copies, is what they call them. Um, that's how we've gotten a lot of the books in the store. But before, just after we started the store, I was also uh, finishing up my career in a government job, and it was 60 miles away. So it would take me an hour, a little over an hour to get there.
Mm,
And so it was really working well
mhm.
with that. Now, like you said, with people in cars are really listening to it. But I think the pandemic thing, people are stuck indoors. They can't get to the libraries to get their books. They can't get to the bookstores to get their
Right.
books. So the next best thing to keep that love of reading going is audiobooks. Um, Now, did you have any input as to who would narrate them, or
That's
was that
all.
all?
That's all decided. That's outside my um, input. Uh, I've had a couple of really uh, good narrators, Michael Page and Davina Davina Porter. I may be saying that wrong. Who that book was nominated for her reading uh, for the very book that I have here, Death in the Lit Chick, was nominated for an Anthony for her take on this. She has a British accent and did a splendid job. Um, I do not choose the narrators. Nobody asked me if I like the narrators. Fortunately, I do, but it's not my choice.
Well, a narrator can definitely make or break a book.
Oh yeah, it's
There's some whose narrations really, their inflections or something just doesn't work well, or they try to do different voices for different characters, and a woman doing a
mm,
man's voice, and more often a man doing a woman's voice, just it doesn't work. So I got to pay
mhm,
attention to the story itself. And okay, you know what? The story's good. I'll still get the hardcover or hard copy into the store. But um, there's been a couple that have been just absolutely fantastic. Um,
right.
that just a typical book that I just wouldn't. Uh, I can't think of it. Um, but anyways, it's just typical books that I probably wouldn't have read, but the narration just made it so good. Um, if you could have any actress portray any of your characters
Mm.
as a voice actor for your audiobooks, who would you
Oh,
choose, like for
as
Max,
a voice actor for Max.
or movie star, TV star, anybody
Mm.
who you know famous person that you like their voice, who would play any of your characters in your books?
Well, who back when I started the Max Tudor series, I pictured Hugh Grant playing the part a bit, his role in Bridget Jones' Diary. That kind of that Hugh Grant, his
Yeah.
personality. He's gotten really a bit extreme lately, but in the day, that was who I pictured as being Max Tudor, and I kind of secretly hoped, as you do, that he would be cast in a TV version of the series. So I guess his voice too, you know, that would be part of it. But it was just his demeanor, his appearance. Max Tudor's a very, very good-looking guy, and he just sort of has this devastating effect on all the women in the village. And there was a lot of, comic opportunity there. Saint Just is a little harder because I made him into not this, massively huge human being. He's probably 6'3", just a big, sturdy guy, and nobody immediately comes to mind uh, for that role. I mean, do send me an email if you think of someone. But yeah.
That with Max, did you go into it with that idea of Hugh Grant, or did it just sort of develop that way? And as the character developed, you know what, Hugh Grant would be a great fit for this character.
It's so long ago I couldn't say for sure. I think that I didn't really sit down and say I'm going to write a book with starring
Mhm.
Hugh Grant. But as the character developed, I think that's and this is about the time of Bridget Jones' Diary. I think the two things melded in my mind. Yeah, and he more and more took over as not as I don't want to not as a roue, but as just an extremely charming character. And his actually Max Tudor's saving grace is that he doesn't know how the effect that he's having on women. He's just, you know,
Mhm.
he just is this guy.
Kristen Hanna, that's what I was trying to think of. Her new book, The
Oh,
Four Winds.
yes.
It's about the depression and the California rush, getting out of Texas in the Midwest because the Dust Bowl and everything like that. Typically not a book that I would think pick up, but it was just so well narrated. I can't rave enough about it, for me anyways. Um,
Okay. Yeah, she's getting a lot of good notice for that book.
yep. And what was neat on the audiobook was at the end they had an interview, a person who was interviewing both of them at the same time, um, about the process
Oh,
and each other. So the three of them were having this, I don't know, it was like a 15-20 minute conversation at the end of the audiobook about the process and about the writing and about coming up with it was very interesting. Um, but yeah, anybody who is looking for a good audiobook, The Four Winds is a definite. Uh, of course, yours as well. Um, so talking about movie stars, would you like to see your series? Either one, the St. Just or the Max Tudor one. Is there any talk about having them as some sort of series or movie or Netflix thing?
yes. A group out in Hollywood had the rights to develop Max Tudor or the option, whatever the wording is. That went on for a couple of years, but nothing came of that. My ideal home for Max and St. Just would be Acorn TV. I mean, kind of no question, or BBC America, one of that type of production, because they do it, so well, and they're
Mhm.
already in London, makes it simpler.
Kind of like the what's that BBC America show? The takes place over in England. Series.
Midsummer Murders, maybe, or anything by
No,
Anthony Horowitz.
okay, no, I can't think of it.
No,
But
so
anyways,
there's Floyd's War. I think that's it. Anyway, there
could
are
be. Anyways,
dozens
there's
of
a.
them. And they're all, yeah, set in England, always, especially Midsummer Murders had what they call the chocolate box uh, villages, and Max Tudor very much came out of that tradition too. So yeah,
Would
I'd
there
love
be any
love to
role
see it.
for Sandra Bullock?
Sandra Bullock, yeah. That's a good question. Don't, I couldn't say. So much of this. I keep talking about Agatha Christie, and the reason is I'm reading a book called Poirot, which is an assessment of all of her books uh, over the years. And they had so many really strange people trying to portray Poirot. We can't imagine it. David Suchet, just took that role and owned it. But before that, there were all these really horrible portrayals that she would complain about bitterly. And if they didn't listen to Agatha Christie, why would they listen to me? Again, it's one of these things like the audio. I think to a large extent, it's out of your hands. You sell them the
Mhm.
rights, and they do what they want.
Well, we have come to the end.
Yeah,
Hopefully, we'll be
that
able to
that went very
see.
fast.
Yeah, it did. It did. Hopefully, we'll be able to see Sandra Bullock in something. If you have any input on it, make sure Sandra Bullock has even a minor role. But I do want
Maybe
to
in the new
say,
books.
what's that?
Maybe in the latest books. I'm already thinking there's a place for her in the latest books. Um, yes, let me just say before we do say goodnight that I intended to leave after an hour, and I just kept talking and talking because you're such a good interviewer. So thank you. Thank you very
No.
much.
Well, thank you. I have really enjoyed this speaking with you. I've really enjoyed this series. I do want to say thank you, a shout out to everybody who has participated in our Maze for Mystery Writers series. It's been fascinating and eye opening for me. Um, your books are available. Give us a call. We can order them. Talk to your local bookstore. They can order them if they don't already have them. They're available through bookshop.org. It's another
Alright.
partner company for a lot of independent bookstores who have Bookshop has been a lifeline for a lot of bookstores over the past 14 months or so. And of course, Libro FM for the audiobooks. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you being a part of it.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good
And
night.
everybody have a good night.
Bye-bye.